Hi guys, and in today's video I'm going to be comparing the LG G5 to the Samsung Galaxy S7, and I'm going to let you know some of my opinions based on the two devices and which one I prefer. So let's start off like having a look at some of the specs of the actual device. So if we go down, both of these phones will be running Android 6.0 as you can see, but the LG will be using LG Skin, which is the 5.0 UX, and the Samsung will be using TouchWiz. So in terms of software, I think it's based on personal preference. However, I do think that you know the LG's new UI needs to be used more in order to like compare it properly to TouchWiz. But I think overall though, Samsung's TouchWiz UI will provide a better experience because some features have been removed on the LG's UI that I wish was still there. For example, you don't have an app drawer on LG's UX. Um, you don't have the Q Slide apps, and you don't have the dual window. And on TouchWiz, you still have access to the app drawer. You could switch it on and off. You could still do multitasking, which is quite good. And on the new LG UX, you can't do that anymore. Even though I do think that LG's UX is more simplistic, it's much easier to use, I feel, and there's less bloatware. But I do think Samsung's TouchWiz interface will provide for a better experience. In terms of the weight of these phones, the difference is minute. So the LG weighing in at 159 grams compared to 152 grams, so it's not much weight. In terms of the build materials, the G5 has got all metal construction, and the S7 is got aluminium, and it's got glass. So it really does depend upon the build and the design you prefer. I mean, personally, I think the S7 is a bit better designed, even though I think the G5's design is quite nice and is simplistic. But I would say the S7's got a nicer design. They've both got fingerprint scanners. Um, the S7 has some advantages. For example, it's water resistant and dust resistant. I believe it's water resistant for about 30 minutes, so it's got IP68 water resistancy. I mean, the S7 does come in more colours, so you got black, grey, white and gold, whereas the G5 you got grey, pink and gold. So colour choices I feel is better on the actual S7. So if we go further down, you've got the display size over here. So the G5 has got a 5.3-inch display compared to 5.1. It really does depend upon the actual size you prefer for viewing experiences, or simply you know holding it in your hand, because bigger devices are more awkward to hold. But it's not a huge difference in terms of size, but I would say I prefer the 5.3-inch screen, as I like a bigger screen for a better immersive experience. In terms of the pixels, they're both quad HD screens, the S7 having a bit more pixels per inch. So the S7's got 576 pixels per inch compared to 554. I don't think this would be noticeable, even though they're both um, quad HD screens. One is Super AMOLED and one is IPS LCD. So the Super AMOLED will always have more saturated colors, so the colors will pop out more, whereas the IPS I feel will have more realistic colors. However, I have noticed with AMOLED screens, some of the whites, say like the whites on like web pages, does have a grey tinge to it, and on IPS display it's more pure white. However, saying that, Super AMOLED screens tend to be more power efficient and can switch off pixels individually, so they've got the same sensors. In terms of camera, they're different. The G5 having a 16 megapixel camera, whereas the S7 has a 12 megapixel camera. With the 16 megapixel camera on the G5, you do have like two cameras as well, so it allows you to take wider pictures. wider than the human eye can see, so you can have a picture where you capture everything. The S7 has a 12 megapixel camera, even though they've lowered the resolution on it. The aperture of the S7 is f1.7 compared to f1.8 on the G5. And what this means is that the f1.7 on the S6 will be better in low light. So, we'd have to have a camera comparison to see, what's better. So, if we scroll further down, they both got some kind of optical image stabilization. The stabilization on the G4 is used more with the laser autofocus, so I don't know how those two compare. So the selfie camera is 5 megapixels on the S7, and you've got 8 megapixels on the G5. So for selfies, the G5 should be better. In terms of the hardware of the device, actually that's the wrong spec for the S7, but they've both got the Snapdragon 820 processor coupled with 4 GB of RAM. Both have the Adreno 530. The specs on the S7 I didn't realize is the wrong specs. That was for the hardware. Apart from that, the other specs are the same. So in terms of spec, so it should really perform the same. However, I do think that the G5 might perform a bit better when opening apps and maybe running some games, because I feel like it's a lighter skin than Samsung's skin. In terms of built-in storage, you've got 32 GB for the G5 for the base model, and for the S7 you've got different variants. So you've got the 32 GB model and the 64 GB model. Yet again, these specs haven't been updated. They've both got micro SD card slots. However, with the G5 you've got the magic slot, so it allows you to remove the battery and have like some accessories like the camera module, the Bang & Olufsen audio, which is quite good. In terms of battery capacity, the G5's capacity has been lowered by 200 milliamps. Don't see why. Maybe it's because they wanted to keep a certain thinness on the phone, which is why they made the capacity lower. On the S7 you've got 3000 milliamps, so I think the battery should be a bit better compared to the G5's battery, and it's got a Super AMOLED screen which tends to be more power efficient. So in terms of connectivity and technology, is all quite standard. They all support the same kind of bands more or less. There's no need to go into some of these features. I mean, the availability for this device is, I should talk about. The G5 should be available for April 2016, and it says the S7 should be available around March time. However, this might not be the date it's released. So in terms of what phone I prefer, I really think it's going to be a difficult choice. I really do like both phones, but I would say that I would probably go for the G5, because I do like having my removable battery, and it's quite nice to have a spare battery, and whenever you run out, plug it in, because I'm a power user. I do use my phone a lot. So the advantages of the G5 is this removable battery, the fact that you can have accessories with that removable tray. It's got a wider angle pictures it can take. In terms of the UI, it's simpler and easier to use. If we talk about the advantages the S7's got, it's got water and dust resistant, which is quite a good feature to implement. I would say the design is better, the sensor is better, and the camera sensor is better for low light pictures. I think the UI is more feature packed for the S7. Also, you've got a higher battery capacity, and I think the construction of aluminium is quite nice, because we know when you drop the phone, aluminium doesn't really lose its shape or form because this is in fact aircraft grade aluminium, whereas full metal bodies, when it drops, it can tend to like dent some parts of the phone. But a drop test, is something else that needs to be tested. So that's a comparison in terms of the specs, even though the hardware specs of the S7, which was wrong, which I didn't realize. Apart from that, the other specs are, accurate. So I hope that's given you a better idea comparing the two phones. Let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, guys.